welcome to another episode of Gripe, the show for short, sweet reviews of new release movies, plus the one thing that annoyed me the most. And you know we're in the full swing of the summer movie season when we get movies like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Angry Birds. But today I'm going to be talking about Warcraft, a movie that, for all intents and purposes, I've been waiting for a very long time to see a Warcraft movie. Obviously, when they announced it a few years ago that Duncan Jones would be directing an adaptation of, the popular video game series, I really got excited to see not only what Duncan Jones could do with it, because he's done a couple of really fantastic movies. Nothing on this scale, but, Moon is an incredible movie. And Source Code was a surprisingly good movie, despite the fact, it was pretty cliche at times, but, it was surprisingly good. I thoroughly enjoyed Source Code. So I was like, okay, we got a good director. How about the cast? The cast includes Travis Fimmel from Vikings. Okay, I don't know much about him, but we'll see how he does. Paula Patton, who, I've seen her in a number of different, movies. She's not bad, but as a lead, let's see how she does. Ben Foster, who's always good in whatever he does, playing just this really, intense character. Going all the way back to when he was in Hostage, one of the creepiest villains ever. And then guys like Dominic Cooper, Clancy Brown, just to name a few of the people who are in this movie. So the cast didn't exactly super get me excited, but at the same time I also knew this is Warcraft. This isn't Lord of the Rings. When you played the games of Warcraft, it was cheesy, just hardcore, high fantasy level type stuff. So so just to kind of give the background, the story kind of jumps right into what you'd expect if you've ever played a Warcraft game. Now, maybe I should back up, because I've never actually played World of Warcraft, but I played Warcraft, Orcs and Humans, and Warcraft 2, Warcraft 3, those games when they came out back in the 90s and early 2000s. So that's my experience with Warcraft, and that's where I was really obsessed with it. But now with, World of Warcraft being more famous, I don't know how this fits in, but with the older stuff, it absolutely does fit in. So just to kind of give you a little bit of a background. So what this story is about basically is, the orcs come from a world that is basically just ravaged. It's destroyed, and there's not any exposition here. It doesn't say, back when. It just basically jumps right into the story, and the orcs are basically following this shaman leader who is going to open the dark portal and basically take them into a different realm where they can basically build a new world. That's their goal, is to build a new world to save their people, and that's what they're doing. And one of the orc chieftains, his name was Duratan, is kind of this, he's obviously very concerned. He's about, he is about to become a father. His wife is, or mate, however you want to call it, is pregnant and about to give birth, and so his goal is he wants to be there when his child is born. And so, they go into the portal together. But he's obviously very concerned about his tribe, about his clan, and making sure his goal is survival, basically. And when they make it through the dark portal, she gives birth, and the shaman basically imbues the child with life, because the child is, not stillborn, but certainly not a strong child when it's born. But Duratan is he just wants, to pass on his legacy to his child. Now, when they enter the dark portal, now they're in the human realm. And when they enter the human realm, they start, pillaging and, basically destroying villages, capturing villagers and all that. And when the, humans hear about this, they're like, okay, what is this force? Because they don't know who these orcs are. They just know that something is destroying their villages. And, they're scrambling to figure out a strategy and what they're going to do. And so they send out, one of their best and, brightest of the, warriors that they have, who's played by Travis Fimmel, Lothar, who, this is classic, Warcraft lore, as you have Lothar. So Lothar, and he basically has this mage who's kind of on his, he was basically trying to figure out what happened to this barracks and there's some like mysterious magic going on, and so he basically takes him kind of as a prisoner, but then also takes him to help them out and kind of figure out what is going on here, by taking him to go see the Guardian, played by Ben Foster, who's like basically the #1 mage. He's like the when it comes to the spellcasters, he is like the top level guy. So they go to get him, basically call upon the Guardian to fight whatever this force is, and that's when they discover it's the orcs. And they also discover that there's a magic that the orcs are using called the Fel, which basically is more or less it's a disease type of magic that sucks life out of the world to give power. Basically, the power is gleaned from just taking life from the living world, and that's the power that Gul'dan, the shaman, uses to open the black portal. So the idea was that they open the black portal, let in their best and strongest warriors, and then once they gather enough souls to sacrifice to this Fel magic, then they're going to let in the rest of the horde. And now you've got the humans who see, okay, this is who our enemy is, and now we need to do something to stop them. And they capture one of the orcs alive, who's played by Paula Patton, Garona. And Garona is kind of this one who, is, learning from the humans and able to communicate with the humans. She still has her loyalties to the orcs, but at the same time, she can understand that, these humans are also trying to just fight for their tribe, and their survival. So she's helping them out. And that's when, she runs, basically they run into Durotan again, and Durotan basically makes an offer that they don't want to follow this shaman with this crazy magic. They want to, basically survive without, following this madman, basically. And so they decide to have, a truce, which the humans kind of weigh in as like, is this something we can do, or, what do we need to do with this? And ultimately, they do have, a civil meeting, but it's disrupted by a betrayal. And I'm not going to get into any kinds of, who betrays who, but basically there's betrayals that happen during this, and it's sort of a, a tragedy that strikes. And it essentially sets up the stage for, the orcs have all the power that they need to to build up the dark portal and open it so that they can let in the rest of the horde, while the humans are trying to gather whatever magic they can to destroy the dark portal and save the people from this rampaging horde of orcs. And of course betrayals are revealed, heroes are imprisoned, and the villains kind of like manipulate people, ultimately to the end where you have this massive battle scene. And in the end of the story, I don't want to give away a lot of spoilers because I mean, there's a lot of things that happen late in the story that I think if I told you, they would you wouldn't want to see the movie because you know what happens. But it essentially, the world is kind of set up for the stage of orcs versus humans when they when this battle occurs. But it's not certainly the set in stone where like the orcs are the villains, the humans are the good guys, which I loved about, I'm glad that they did this, because, I mean, the original Warcraft, you can play as orcs or as humans. You can play as Horde or Alliance. And when you play as Horde, you know that things are not, you know that you're attacking humans, you know you're basically invading their world and destroying their world, but they don't feel like villains when you're playing as the Horde, whereas when you're playing as humans, yes, they do feel like villains, but to get both sides, that's certainly something that for me has always been kind of inspiring, to have like two sides of the story instead of just the one side. It's good to get one side of a story, but to hit both sides of the same, two sides in the same event, now that's interesting, which I'm glad that they did that with this movie. So, I mean, the plot is not in any way complicated. It's a very simple plot, but it's a fantasy movie, akin to the, fantasy movies of the, 80s and 90s. Things that we really don't see a lot of anymore, especially since Lord of the Rings set a standard so ridiculously high that no movie will ever be able to touch that, including Peter Jackson's own Hobbit trilogy, which probably should have only been Hobbit movie. But ultimately, you know, Warcraft is it's a tough movie to judge because there's a part of me that just loves seeing I love fantasy. Like Warcraft is one of those things that as a kid really like got me interested in, you know, swords and, you know, like basically fantasy medieval type of, you know, stories, and, you know, like Lord of the Rings, those type of things, like really got me into fantasy. So to see movies like this, I'm always that kind of like giddy. And Warcraft is certainly an ambitious project because you have so much lore to come from, to draw from, and you know you're not going to be able to please everybody because people who've played World of Warcraft and never played the original stories might go into this going, well, this is nothing like World of Warcraft. Maybe it is, I don't know. But when I watch it, I say this is a lot like what I imagined it would be when I was, you know, a kid in the 90s playing Warcraft 2 for 8 hours straight. But, I mean, at the same time, it's not a great movie, like, overall. It's entertaining, and it plays service to the fans, but it's not a great movie overall. The acting is, you know, pretty standard. There's, you know, I think the most emotion I got out of any character was from Duratan, and Duratan is an animated character. So all the, you know, the emotion is coming from, you know, what is said and what, you know, the facial expressions, which the visual effects in that are fantastic. What they do with the orcs and seeing their faces, it is fantastic. I'm no complaints there whatsoever. But the humans, there's not a ton of emotion. There's a couple of scenes that really do like tug at the heartstrings. One in particular, during the betrayal scene, that one, there is a moment there that's pretty rough, and then toward the end. So there are a couple of scenes, but I mean they don't necessarily hit with the same kind of impact that you would have like with, you know, Lord of the Rings. Like the end of Fellowship of the Ring when Boromir dies, that is something that just like cuts you to the core, because I mean it's a guy who betrayed and then, you know, realized his mistake and comes back to help and ends up dying in the process. That sort of thing is like, wow, that gets you. This movie doesn't have anything like that, and I'm not saying that this movie had to have something like that, but there's a few moments that are akin to a moment like that that just don't resonate. They don't register very well, and it's not a matter of the acting. It's not a matter of the direction. It's just kind of that, you know, maybe because it happens so fast. A lot of I mean, it's a very fast-paced movie. You know, it's 2 hours long, and they pack a lot into those 2 hours, so it's very, very fast, very quick. But it just doesn't land very, very well. Dialogue and all that, it's very straightforward. It's like straight out of the video game, which I'm not going to hold that against it. And it annoys me that people criticize video game movies just because they are video game movies. Yes, this is not a great movie, but it does what it needs to do, and it provides an entertaining distraction for 2 hours, which is fine by me. I didn't go into this expecting it to be the next Lord of the Rings. I could tell you that straight from the trailers. This did not have the feeling of Lord of the Rings, but Warcraft never did. It always was this like epic battle game. It was a battle strategy game. That was what it was. It was not this, you know, like, you know, metaphor for, you know, like friendship or suffering or all these other things that Lord of the Rings has behind it. So to compare it to Lord of the Rings is ridiculous, but to call it out just because it's a video game, which I've noticed a lot of the criticisms of this movie are that, well, it's a video game, I didn't play it, so I don't get it. It's like, well, that's not a good criticism. If you have objective reasons why this movie is not good, like, say, the writing, not great. Character development. There is some decent character development, but not on a broad scale. It's mostly kept with, you know, a couple of characters. So, I'm not going to ding it too much for that. I mean, it's a fantasy adventure. That's what it is, and I think it did enough to give us that story. Now, I mean, to say a movie gave us enough, that's not a ringing endorsement. That isn't to say, like, go out and see this movie. It's really more of just like, go out and give it your own judgment. I mean, because I've seen both sides. I've seen people who absolutely hated it, and I've seen people who absolutely love it. And the love and hate is almost for the, polar opposite reasons. So, and then for my key gripe, this one was kind of tough because, like, it's one of those movies where there was nothing that bothered me a lot throughout the movie. It wasn't like there was any one thing that was, like, nagging at me, or, like, one scene that really nagged at me. But there was a few parts of the movie where I'm watching it, and I watched it in 3D. I didn't necessarily want to, but, and I didn't think 3D really enhanced it that much, but I did watch it in 3D. And there were a few parts where the visual effects were bad, and I don't like nitpicking little things, but the movie is like 99% green screen, and there's a few scenes where, like, he's flying on a griffin through the sky, and it's so fake looking. Like, I mean, it looks like something out of, the 80s, where they have the action and then the green screen behind them, and it's like, whoa! I mean, there were a few moments that were like that, and it kind of like, it's like, because the way the orcs looked in this movie are fantastic. The visual effects on the orcs are beautiful. And, some of the imagery that they come up with is great, but the integration of live action and green screen doesn't always work so well, which is why in the first half of this movie, I was thinking, what would have actually made this movie more popular, and what would have probably been, the critics would have been okay with, is if this movie had been entirely animated. And unfortunately, there haven't been a lot of great, like, animated epics. I mean, Zemeckis tried to do a bunch of them, movies like Beowulf that didn't necessarily land with audiences. I loved Beowulf, but it didn't land with audiences because it's like, well, why do an animated movie of real people when you could just do a live action movie? Well, here where you have that hybrid where you want to create the aesthetic of the orcs with, the really big orcs, not like the ones from Lord of the Rings, and have the humans there, you compromise there, which I think they did a good job with, but the problem is because it's so much of it is green screen, a lot of the movie does feel fake. You're not immersed in that world the same way you are with, some of these other movies. I keep coming back to Lord of the Rings, but it's an easy comparison. So, whereas with Lord of the Rings, it's, a lot of that you could, it blends so well. This one, there was a lot of that contrast, and it did kind of annoy me. So it's like, I kind of wish this movie had just been all animated, because then maybe people would have given it they would have looked at it with a different perspective. It might not have changed the story or the character development, but if you're going to Warcraft to see a movie about character development, then your priorities are already out of whack. So that's all I got to say about that. So I'd give Warcraft 6.5 out of 5. Thoroughly enjoyable, definitely a flawed movie, but worth another viewing. Certainly one I would recommend people see and give their own opinions. In fact, if you have seen it, you want to give your opinion, please do so in the comments below. Let me know what you think and if you agree or disagree with me. Otherwise, though, I'd say go see it. Hopefully you'll enjoy it if you're a fan of this sort of genre. If you're not, then you probably won't like it, because it's very much a high fantasy movie, and something that we haven't seen really done well in a long time or ever, outside of Lord of the Rings. But even that one is, like I said, it's an unattainable standard. So that's my review of Warcraft. So go ahead and go see it, and I will see you next time on Key Gripe. Thank you.